Hi guys, my name is Isabel if you don't already know me, and today I'll be talking to you about my 4 years of teaching experiences and how they have changed throughout the examples I'm going to show you today. But before I do that, I'm going to talk to you about pedagogy. I think it's really important to have really discovered what the word pedagogy means. It is evident through research that pedagogy is an encompassing term which relates directly to what a teacher does to influence the learning in students. My aim as a teacher in the 21st century is to be fair, humble, and push for equality, not just in the classroom but the whole school community. I have seen how education can be the most powerful weapon to change the world. My personal teaching stance is to allow students to go outside and use the outdoor environment for curriculum learning. Recently I did a maths lesson which was discovering geometry shapes in the school community. This was fantastic to do with the students and they loved it. Built-in highlights the importance that the outdoor area is a complete learning environment which caters for all children's needs: cognitive, linguistic, emotional, social and physical. We could say that children don't need to go out, but if we look at the research of Blackmore and Frith, 2005, their evidence strongly suggests that you cannot deny the environment to children. Children and staff both need to go out regularly throughout the day, particularly as some classes are very stuffy and don't give the ventilation needed. Experience and education. Dewey. Dewey highlights that learning should be about experience. Students should experiment and construct to create purposeful learning environment, which is centered on Dewey's teaching philosophy of progressive education. All my lessons that I have created are centered around meaningful experiences that create high-order thinking. Dewey highlights that students need to learn by doing. I align my teaching stance with Dewey's philosophy. Dewey believed that human beings learn through a hands-on approach. I have implemented this approach into my teaching lessons. One was getting the students to make their own rotational models using paper plates in a science lesson. Another lesson was getting students to use fractions within a cooking lesson. Using mathematics in a hands-on approach to learning is highly engaging and allows students to have less stress when using real-life mathematical experiences. I'm going to relate students to my 3 fruits I have in my hand. Yes, they are all fruits, but they are not the same fruit. Students are not all the same, and thus we need to help students flourish by celebrating students for being different. If you look on the screen, I have detailed 6 pedagogical beliefs that fit with my personality and how I wish to teach my students. My teaching philosophy is centered on a constructivist teaching style, which encompasses inquiry-based learning. Piaget believed a child could not learn unless they are constantly interacting with their environment by creating mistakes and learning from them. I believe students need to be aware that it is okay to make mistakes, and we as humans need to make them in order to learn and grow. Constructivism is a philosophy of learning created on reflection from our personal experiences. Allowing students to develop their own work is highly important. If you look at the picture next, which is a student's work on a whiteboard, the grade 2 student was using different mathematical operations to get to the number 888. The student showed me their work before they completed the activity. Making students accountable for their mistakes is highly important to their learning. As a constructivist teacher, we believe students should help be responsible for their learning and not just tell this student no, but work with them and find out why they gave you that answer. Piaget's theory allows teachers to view students as individual learners who add new concepts to prior knowledge to construct or build understanding for themselves. I wish to provide experience-based educational opportunities. Rich learning experiences are important. I did an art literacy lesson which focused on using descriptive art definitions such as technique, the word convey, and aesthetic. These students were to look at different artworks and become art critics. Then write what their 2 favourite artworks were and why. Giving students a choice in learning, I believe, is highly important. As a constructivist teacher, I believe it's important for students to use their brains as a muscle. So, looking at the game Monopoly, I believe this is highly important to play in a classroom. Not only is it fun for students to play, but it also has boundless mathematical purposes surrounding it, such as banking, strategies, and team building. If we look at Sudoku as well, this is one that is great for the brain. It allows students to place numbers in special orders to create a pattern. Allowing students to communicate with one another is highly important. Students should work closely with one another, developing ideas and discussing their views. My partner and myself developed a science lesson sequence from the 5E model. We began developing our lessons from backwards planning, looking at the curriculum under science for levels 1 and 2, then developing our inquiry-based science lessons. Developing our lessons using the 5E model allowed us to see how best to plan an engaging science inquiry lesson. This 5E model I would not just use in science, but across the different areas of the curriculum. Looking at the AITSL standard of 1.5, differentiating teaching to meet the specific learning needs of students across the full range of abilities. Here I've highlighted two examples. Looking at these examples, it is evident that differentiating students' activities is important. Students are all so different and do not all think the same. Their activities should be diverse to suit their learning needs. The goal here was for students to work at their best ability to create high quality work. The students were given numbers as shown on either the line or the apple. The students had to use subtraction, such as working from a high number and subtracting something to get the answer as shown on the page. In terms of student learning, some students were using manipulatives such as counters for the low group, working with numbers between 10 and 20, whereas the medium to high group were using numbers between 30 to 150 or beyond. These students use speed frames, MAB blocks and or written and mental strategies. Student-centered learning, I believe, is about giving students tasks that suit their needs, whether it be for extension or enabling activities. My development here as a teacher is shown by me understanding to really pull back some students who are struggling and, if need be, start them with a lower number, in which I had to do. Some students are not grasping the concept of base 10, but others were working in the thousands. Thus, differentiating the tasks is paramount to student learning. Looking at 5.1 of the AITSL standard, which is assessing student learning, I have an example here which shows how I have assessed a student's pre-test. When looking at this student's assessment piece, I have placed them in the low group, and this shows me exactly how I would need to plan the lessons to help suit this and other students which have misconceptions around place value. For example, this student has some misconceptions around fractions, what is larger and what is smaller. Looking at the number line from the smallest to largest, this student has got confused with some numbers. This shows me that ordering numbers with a higher and lower value is something I will need to help with this student. It seems that overall on this page this student is struggling with place value, and developing a lesson sequence to differentiate student activities is necessary. As a constructivist teacher, I believe it's highly important for students to understand and get feedback from their tests. I believe it's highly important when looking at students' tests not to compare one another, but to compare the student to themselves. Looking at the AITSL standard again for 5.1, which is assesses students' learning. Looking at this student's data, I also take into account that this student has a learning disability. This student will need high levels of support during mathematics. As a constructivist teacher, I have many ideas to help this student. Firstly, this student will need hands-on manipulatives such as Play-Doh, counters, bead frame, 100 charts to help with their learning. Going through the student's data for this test, I've discovered that many students actually do not understand base 10 value. So I've incorporated a Play-Doh Smash game, which allows students to use Play-Doh to help them with subtraction in a fun and engaging way. Looking at 2.6 for the AITSL standard, which is Information and Communication Technology, ICT. I believe technology serves a purpose in the education system, but I believe it shouldn't just be used for the sake of it. There should be a purpose as to why you are using it. Here I am with a grade 1 and 2 class introducing the topic of why do we have seasons. The students watched a video of the Earth's rotation and revolution. The students got to watch a video which sparked their engagement into the topic. This links to my pedagogical stance because I believe students should explore topics through engaging experiences. All the students were fascinated when watching this video, and we had some insightful discussions on their prior knowledge. Under the heading 2.6 for Information and